Welcome to PayPod, the show that features thought-provoking interviews with leaders and entrepreneurs in the payments and financial technology industries. From credit card processing to Bitcoin, we cover it all. So if you want to know what's happening right now in the payments industry, stay tuned. Now, here's your host, Scott Hawksworth.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of PayPod, the Payments and Fintech podcast. It's a new year, and on today's show, we are going to be taking a look at upcoming trends as 2021 rolls along. Specifically, we're going to be diving into mobile fintech trends. More than ever before, people are using their mobile phones for banking, payments, managing their finances, and beyond. This has massive implications for so many industries and also brings into question issues of security, privacy, and so much more. So with that said, I'm thrilled to be joined again by an expert guest from the company Entersekt, which provides mobile-first fintech solutions. We had one of Entersekt's team members on way back in May of 2019, so it will be nice to get an update on the latest goings-on with them. This time, Gerard Oosthuizen, who is the Chief Technology Officer at Entersekt, is joining us. Gerard can help offer some perspective on these mobile fintech trends. In his role as CTO, he is responsible for innovation, R&D, and rolling out strategic initiatives to their customers. He also drives their technology alliances and industry collaboration. So we have a ton of fascinating things to cover. Let's dive right into it. Gerard, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Scott. Great to be here.
Thank you for joining us. Today, as I said at the top, we want to talk about mobile fintech trends in 2021. But to set the stage, I think it's helpful to take a look at where we are right now. If you had to give a brief, state of the union, quote unquote, of the fintech world at a high level, what are some of the biggest things happening, particularly as it relates to mobile payments, innovation, security? What are some of the notable opportunities and maybe challenges in mobile fintech at the moment?
Well, Scott, that's probably an hour's worth of
right.
I can give you. I think the reality is that banks are under pressure. We can all see this. Some of the banks we speak to are spending half of their time just taking care of regulatory environments. And then they're also stuck with a technology revamp. A lot of them are stuck with cores and digital platforms that don't enable great user experiences for their customers. And there's tech funds, the big guys are increasingly competing against them, opening up digital-only banks. And then at the same time, we've got the payment rails. It all used to be card. And now we're getting those push payments coming in. In Europe, we're seeing open banking open up. So banks are under pressure and they have to do something. And they're recognizing that fintechs are there to assist, not to be competing with them, but that fintechs can help them accelerate, help bring best breed into the market. And I think there's a lot of opportunities with open banking, with these new payment rails, lots of opportunities to create better user experiences and bring that to the consumers. So I think it's an exciting time. I think it's a time where there's going to be a lot of disruption. And I think when we look back, 2020 will probably be the year that's a catalyst for a new way of banking in the next 5 to 10 years.
I completely agree. And I love, too, that you sort of pointed out how banks are kind of realizing that these fintechs aren't just these competitors, that there are so many great opportunities there and for them to work together. It's something that I've talked with a number of guests about how can banks and fintechs coexist? And are they in opposition or are they working together? And it seems, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, it seems like you feel that they can really coexist and in fact drive each other forward.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that's unlocking it is almost the banks recognizing that they have to bring new banking platforms to bear. And in the modern world, and certainly if we look at Europe, where open banking is a hot topic, all of the new platforms are opening APIs. So the capability of stringing multiple capabilities and SaaS services together is helping to facilitate this. In the old days, the core banking system was a COBOL system with a DB2 database at the back. But these days, they're modern systems, and that allows some of that innovation to thrive and fintechs to be able to beneficiate on top of that.
Speaking of systems and all of the different organizations that are out there, for those who may be unfamiliar and maybe they haven't yet heard the previous episode where Entersekt was featured, what exactly does Entersekt do in the world of fintech and payments and beyond? What services do you offer and who do you tend to serve? Put another way, where do you guys fit into this ecosystem?
Yeah. So at Entersekt, our goal is to enable a fully digital experience for a bank, to therefore enable their digital channels. But unlike others that offers a core business feature, we enable a digital security platform, a mechanism for them to authenticate their customer, to securely engage with their customer, and then build services on top of that. So we get a happy customer. They're able to deliver full functionality on their digital channels. It starts with authentication. And, we're proud of the fact that we get rid of SMS OTPs because they're insecure and they're a terrible user experience. And we make that mobile app capable of doing full banking. And through the banking app as a trusted endpoint, we enable other use cases and all your other channels, whether that's your online banking, whether that's your call center, being able to reach out to the mobile app and use the sensors on that device allows you to really know you're speaking to the customer and that you're secure. Customer feels protected, and then that enables you to do 3D secure e-commerce, QR payments, and a bunch of other transactions on top of that.
So very much bringing it all together. And when we're talking about mobile, it's obvious that things have continued to change and more folks are not going into their bank branch. They are doing all of their banking on their phone, and Entersekt helps people do that, right? And do that securely and safely, right?
100% correct, yes.
So, okay, to kind of bring it back to the discussion of these mobile fintech trends, we've set the stage for where we are. It's going to be interesting to see where things are going. Probably one of the most critical things, I think, that will continue to be a challenge for organizations and individuals when it comes to fintech and mobile is the ongoing pandemic. In 2021, I'm curious, how do you think the payments and fintech world will continue to respond to these evolving needs of customers related to the pandemic? We've had a lot of discussion about the pandemic and social distancing and these types of things really pushing digital forward and kind of causing almost a leap just because of necessity. So I'm curious what developments around it might we see as we continue into 2021 and how it might impact things from a mobile fintech perspective.
Yeah, again, a lot of countries are in lockdown and people are not maybe comfortable going into a branch. And the postal services are not disrupted. So checks and other kind of things are not guaranteed delivery. And that almost accentuates the need to be able to have a fully serviceable digital enablement so that you can give all your services digital. And the COVID situation is just accentuating that for consumers. They're seeing, I can't do this, but my buddy's bank can. And that's going to accelerate this awareness from the consumer. His expectations increase. So we've seen lots of interest in digital onboarding. We've seen even a lot of movement around contactless. So, QR payments. Even the US is now, PayPal adopting QR, and there's rumors of even Apple looking at QR payments. Contactless payments, not just NFC, but also QR is becoming more norms. We're also seeing now that a lot of consumers that might not have been open to digital is being forced into digital. And unfortunately, that creates a bit of a challenge in the fraud and security space because you've got perhaps not a digitally native person now treading into the digital waters. And that's where the likes of social engineering attacks, where I'm calling somebody and offering to be the bank and helping you and actually coaxing you into giving me information is unfortunately one of the bad consequences of this. Because banks have to open up, they're enabling more features, and then there's a vulnerable community. And you have to make sure that you protect your consumers completely in this new world, enabling them, but also protecting them.
That's a really good point, and one that I hadn't really considered as you have people who are maybe not as digitally savvy. They're moving on to these new platforms. They're starting to log into their bank account from their phone. And I can see how, if they're used to always going into their branch and having that friendly smiling face right there, help them out and all of this, that they might be vulnerable to, someone over the phone saying a few things or what have you, right?
Absolutely. And, there's such a lot of things where that first engagement or the first couple of engagements, if you have a bad experience, you can stop. You will disengage. Cases where, I think 30% or something of customers, if e-commerce transactions declined, will never use that card online again. So getting it wrong is also very bad for our issues, for the banks. So these people are in an unfamiliar state and are having very complex processes or processes that doesn't take them on a journey so that they feel uncomfortable. Oh, what just happened? What did I click? I think it's very important to get that balance right.
Absolutely. And you're dealing with folks, finances, their payments, whatever it is. I think that people are on even higher alert for something like that. If they're not having the experience they expect, if they're getting frustrated, if it's not a smooth user experience, I could definitely see how things could go sideways very quickly. And then someone like my father is saying, this thing won't work, and then chucks the phone, that kind of thing.
Scott, there's actually another one that's also quite interesting is, COVID has caused a number of people to be, let's say, in financial duress. And we're actually seeing some trends emerge that, let's call it friendly fraud, is also starting to emerge, where I might say, well, I did buy this, but I never received it, but I actually did. And family fraud and friendly fraud is another one of those things that sort of unexpected, but perhaps understood when you look at the challenges some people are under. So it's another one that's perhaps not expected, but once you understand it, it makes sense.
Absolutely. So you were kind of touching on this earlier with, okay, we've got this increased rise in digital banking and payments and all of this. You were touching on the issues with potential social engineering. It's really created this need for more robust cybersecurity and responses to targeted phishing scams, hacks, and so on. With so much moving digitally, the bad guys are ramping up their efforts. How do you think fintech organizations can or should be approaching this? What are some of the maybe keys to success when it comes to security in a financial world that's increasingly digital?
Yeah, so the recipe books has sort of been around for many years talking about two-factor authentication. Unfortunately, it's a bit stale and perhaps sometimes not practical. We know that, knowledge-based authentication, most people can't remember their favorite food or their first girlfriend's name or favorite movie. And passwords are reused regularly. I think a trick that people need to recognize is, look, today in the US, we're seeing chip cards, EMV cards rolled out. Magstripe cards was easy to copy. They were able to copy them digitally. Chip cards is more difficult to copy. I have to come and steal it physically from you. And part of the things that we've certainly seen is of a lot of value is to make your mobile phone as trustworthy as that physical card you've got. The beauty of that physical device is that you'll know if it's gone. And secondly, with COVID, they can't even come and steal it so easily from you. So they have to come and physically steal it. And if you can get that right, then if you know the customer is coming in from a trusted device, a trusted endpoint, and then if on top of that, you can layer biometric so that they don't have to remember a password, I think that's a recipe for a much better journey. So start off by trying to get a number of trusted devices that you've onboarded the customer, and then try to get a familiarity by pointing back to those devices and saying, great, I have got Gerard's phone, and I can always, when I'm uncertain, I can go back to that phone and ask Gerard, listen, Gerard, are you comfortable with this? I'm going to be more comfortable, and the bank will know that they've got the customer's consent for that transaction. Now, both parties win. So I think starting to build up a list of trusted devices and leveraging that at any higher risk event is key.
I think that's such a great point. And I think about it, my wife, we've had some frustrations recently where she's gone and gotten gas at certain gas stations around us. And a couple of times she's had the credit card stripped or whatever. And then we've had to cancel it and do all of this. And as you were going through that, I'm thinking, wow, wouldn't it be so great if all of that was just on the phone and one literally couldn't pull the credit card information by spoofing the scanner or what have you? That's amazing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the reality is that Magstripe, the swiping activity, it's so easy to copy. It's just a set of data. And if I've stolen that data, I can replay it. The modern crypto systems, the ones we offer, and even what the chip cards in the machine in the car does, is every single time there's a challenge and a cryptographic response. Every challenge response is new. So even if I've stolen your car details, I have to provide cryptographic proof that this time is again me. And I think that part, that challenge response of every transaction, prevents this replay attack that we've all had stories on, where cards have been cloned and then used all around the world.
Absolutely. And when you talk about mobile too, the opportunity, you were touching on biometric and things like that, to add this extra layer of protection where if, let's say, a person misplaces their phone or it gets stolen or what have you, then one, you have that protection where they know it's gone because it's, hey, my phone's gone. So instantly you kind of have that alert. But then when you have things in place where that phone essentially just becomes a brick, if someone who's going to do evil with it, they can't even get in there, or they can't get into the banking app, or they don't have the biometric print that can even unlock the phone. That's huge in security, right?
Absolutely. That these days, so much, we've had so many stories where people forgot their keys, and that's okay. But when they forget their phone, they turn back home and go get it.
Right.
4 times a minute or something like that, we look at our phones. That's wrong, but the reality is we really notice it very quickly if it's gone. Whereas your wallet might lay and you may not look at your card, and you might actually not see that your card's been swapped out with another card. But you're going to see that the apps on this phone is different, and I can't unlock it with my face. So it's a challenge.
In your role as CTO, you're responsible for much of the strategic innovation and the R&D at Entersekt. There are so many fintechs and payments businesses out there who want to have, I guess, a quality roadmap. They want to stay ahead of the technology. They want to go to where it's going to be, not necessarily where it is right now. At a high level, what do you think some of the keys to building successful strategy around mobile financial technology will be in 2021?
I think we've touched on some of them. I think the ability for you to have that base foundation layer in place is important. So start off with that and make sure that you can securely engage with your customer. And then have an orchestration layer on top of that you can layer those use cases on. And I think leverage the power of API. So try to get integration going between your different systems. Get a platform in place that enables you to reach out to the various disparate systems, and that the consumer sees one way of confirming a transaction, enabling that transactions. I think that'll allow you to reach out to third parties, but still regain control of the consumer. There's a whole world out there and a whole debate running around the digital identity. Who owns the consumer? And the tech firms have done a great job of there. I think the banks need to recognize that trust and the trust in the identity that they provide is an important part of their future. They need to make that identity integral and the ability to authenticate the user. And then that identity could even be used for other services. But that's where the customer's trust is. And trust is what banks have. And that's what they need to strengthen and reinforce with their consumer.
Right. So put another way is, if you are wanting to stay ahead of the technology and have a strategy that's going to work, if you keep that trust, that identity, those types of things kind of at the center of your roadmap, that could work out very well for you. Is that a fair way of saying that, Gerard?
Absolutely. And I think there's an inverse of that. And I don't know how big the WhatsApp announcement fallout has been in your world as well, but the amount of people now joining Telegram and Signal because that trust has been destroyed or that trust has been hurt.
Mm-hmm.
It's so important that banks recognize and be responsible with that trust of their consumer, and that they use that because that's what they have. They don't necessarily have the slickest UX. They don't necessarily have the widest consumer brand, but they have their consumers' trust, they have their money, and they need to recognize that that's a key asset for them to protect.
So trust may be one of the pieces here, and I'm curious if there might be any other ones, because it seems like there are just more and more options out there when it comes to payments, banking, other financial tools every day. So in 2021, there's going to be new products, new fintechs launched, and so on. What do you think maybe the keys to really standing out in the industry with so much noise to kind of break through the crowd is. How might organizations in the fintech world try to get, I guess, a leg up on their competition to even just get the awareness out there and get someone to download that app, use their tool, whatever it might be?
So at Entersekt, we have a view that, it's very difficult to invest in getting your own app out there. For example, downloading a new payment app might be something that before you've got 5 ways to make the payment app to register. I think for us, being able to put that in a central place into the banking app, for example, is a key way that they do not have to get the customer to reinvest. It's just one morning he wakes up and suddenly the app says, would you like me to provision Apple Pay for you? Or the next morning it says, listen, you can now scan at Starbucks. Would you like to do that? So the ability to layer into a current real estate at a bank, I think is important. So being able to embed certain capabilities into their banking app might be a great way for a fintech to also bring new services to market without having to invest in that new fintech app. I think convenience is always going to be important. People need to be able to know that it works. And that I think the challenge is getting a tipping point. So you can create a network effect with your app, that it suddenly works with others. I think that whole thing of creating interoperability will also be of great value to consider, making sure that you don't have to build it from zero, that you can leverage other networks that exist already.
That really underscores your point. You were talking earlier about the power of being able to integrate those third-party integrations, APIs, these types of things. So if you do have, if there's someone listening and you do have this great idea, this great tool, reach out, see what partnerships you can establish, because there may be an existing bank that it would be a perfect fit for, and that would give you a built-in connection to their customers. And really, it makes sense if you think about it. Who wants 10, 20 different apps if you're just trying to make a payment or log into check your account balance or what have you? You want to do it all in one place. You want that one app right on your home screen, and it can be your banking app, right?
Absolutely, Scott. And I think, we've seen Asia being the leaders in that with these mega apps, Alipay and WeChat and these things being almost complete ecosystems upon their own. I'm not sure necessarily the general US consumer is ready for that, but a certain element of that convenience of just being able to go to the one app. I've only had to register myself once. I trust their brand already. It's not a new app that asks me to enter my car details and set up. There's an element of convenience, and you get that balance right. I think there's real power there.
Absolutely. Machine learning. Okay. I know we're covering big topics here, but I think that it's just so important to at least touch on some of them. Machine learning.
With some machine learning.
It's something that continues to make waves in the fintech world, particularly when it's been applied to security. And we've had a couple episodes where we've, dove into this more. And I'm just curious, on your perspective, why is machine learning such a hot topic right now? And what do you think about its potential trajectory over this coming year?
Well, I think it's a hot topic because it works. It's been very effective in sort of fraud patterns and detecting not just it's Scott again, because I've learned Scott's behavior, but also even on the opposite side, saying it's not a human, or it's not a novice user. The user is very familiar with the screen. So in terms of, let's first go in behavioral biometric, the ability to identify a bad actor and conversely a positive signal around a recurring user, it works. It's great because it's in the background. I think there's a lot of other applications of it around fraud events, prioritizing fraud. So we're definitely seeing a great adoption on it. And I think there's even some subtleness. I talked about family fraud, but let's say you can detect with behavioral biometrics that it isn't Scott, but it is on a device. Maybe I can even silently reach out to Scott and say, listen, Scott, your daughter is buying a dollhouse. Would you like to approve? Help consumers trade around uncomfortable environments. So it can be used, I think, if you apply it carefully and you don't scare the user with the amount of knowledge you have, it can be with great success to further enrich that trust and create optimized journeys, better journeys that are predictable. And I think then in terms of financial and planning and predicting what's the next, Scott's now here, what's the next need going to be? Banks being able to upsell and help customers on their journey, and financial planning and all of that. I think there's lots of benefit there. So not only can it protect, it can also help and guide us. I think it's a great potential. I do think, though, it's important to consider the privacy angle. So I think that's the opposite of it, where there's a real push towards privacy and autonomy of my data, a right to forget. And I think that's the challenge that the organizations face for it to potentially take its full potential.
I agree. And I'm recalling there's that story, and I think it was years ago now at this point, but the story of the woman who was shopping at Target, and Target knew that she was pregnant before she did. And there was that whole question there of, okay, how much is too much here? So that's a balance that needs to be struck. But then there is this potential of, oh, wow, if you can know, oh yeah, it is Scott, it is Gerard. That is such a powerful tool. And so I think you're spot on, right on the money there in terms of why machine learning is going to continue to be such a powerful, powerful topic and place for innovation, really, when we're talking about fintech.
The challenge, of course, Scott, is the inverse as well, right? With AI, deep fakes, and the ability to now also, impersonate a user, use an AI bot, like, what's it, Lyrebird or something like that can fake your voice. The adversaries are also using it against it. So we're going to get a bit of an arms race happening pretty soon, where I'm going to try to game the system. Potentially I'll throw some bad data points at it so that the AI gets some bad mojo going. And then I'm going to go and in that noise trying to come in, or I'm going to use AI to use your recording of this webinar and call your bank and sound like Scott.
Absolutely. I think anytime we talk about security, there's always this reality that we're the good guys here. We want security to be stronger and all of this, but the bad guys have, unfortunately, access to all the same technologies, really, and they're constantly working to try to match it and beat it and what have you. So you have to sort of have that awareness that it's not the kind of thing where you develop one thing and it's like, great, we won, we beat fraud. That's just not something that's going to happen. Okay, we've been talking a lot about just trends and things like that. As we kind of wind down our discussion here, I want to turn our attention to Entersekt itself. As you guys are moving through 2021, if you could peer into the crystal ball, what do you see in the future for Entersekt? Are there any specific technologies or products on the horizon that you can share, of course, that our listeners might find to be interesting?
Our game is authentication. I think I'll probably touch on 2 points there. The one is, you can now, I don't know if you know about it, activate your biometric from within a browser with no app required. So the ability to perform passwordless authentication from within a browser is now available on most devices, PCs and phones out there through a technology called WebAuthn. So that means that a better user experience is now possible in a lot of cases. And I think that's going to unlock a world where the potential is there for truly passwordless authentication, where you don't even have a password, where you're always just using biometric. I think that's an exciting journey, and I think FIDO will help us get there. I think the second thing we need to realize is that in the past, it used to be, okay, do something and then pause, let's quickly authenticate you, ask your password, send an OTP and verify you. These days, a checkout experience and a transaction or a new service that you want to offer, authentication is going to be integrated into the journey. And that's how you need to think about it. It's not a separate thing. You're just going to put your fingerprint down to confirm the transaction. And you need to be ready for that. And I think those are two things that we're really focusing on, being able to create an experience that's convenient and passwordless on whatever channel you are, whatever self-service channel you are, and then making sure that the journey has authenticating built in. It's not this separate sidecar thing that you have to do and then jump back into the interaction. It's going to be part of the journey. And that really speaks to customer experience, lower abandonment for merchants and higher conversion, better customer loyalty and better volumes for your business.
That's all exciting stuff, and I'm sure music to the ears of a lot of folks who are listening right now, especially when you're talking about lower abandonments and these types of things. And it's going to be interesting to see how it all shakes out, where things go. All right, we have a segment that we like to end with on each and every show. It's 5 questions. It's rapid fire. Are you ready?
I guess I'm as ready as I'll ever be.
Okay, we've been talking a lot about just this year. If you could make a prediction about the future of mobile payments or fintech that you expect will happen in the next 5 years, so even longer term.
Let me try to structure this Gartner would. Let's say by 5, a third of customers will have a digital-only bank account with no physical branches. I think the reality is that you're going to get people that's dipping their toe in, and then people are going to get a good experience, and before you know it, it's just going to be the norm. And I think the early and late adopters will probably start going there soon, specifically because of COVID.
Yep, the dominoes will fall, I agree. What's one cool piece of payment-related technology that you've come across recently, but unrelated directly to your company that impressed you?
So perhaps a bit early, but we've been looking a lot at how to get a mobile to interact with the physical world. And these days, recently, Apple and Samsung are starting to embed ultra wideband chips inside of their phones. Bluetooth Low Energy really is not stable and good enough for that interactions. But I'm really excited to see the potential what these ultra wideband chips can do to detect how far a device or another phone is from me for person-to-person payments and other things. I think that'll be an interesting one to explore. We've got it in our backlog to play with. I can't tell you how good it is yet, but the demos definitely look impressive.
In the next 5 years, most people around the world will make a purchase with either Bitcoin, Apple Pay, WeChat Pay, some other thing. Which one and why?
I'm probably going to go with Apple Pay. I think the one that you don't have on there is QR. There's a lot of it that QR will grow, but from the list and the amount of handsets out there, I'd go for Apple Pay.
What's one piece of advice you would have for someone who's considering the fintech industry as a career?
It's a boring one, but it's an important one. It's the fintech industry. It's the financial services industry. Make sure you understand the regulations and the standards in the industry, because those are the gateways to unlock potential. Because when new regulations comes out, it creates disruption. Where there's an API or a standard that is being used, you can use that. Just don't fall into the trap of only thinking of using it for the way it was intended. Be creative around that part. But know the boundaries and know what you can do and know what banks have to do. And that's a great way for you to innovate. Last
question here. What's the best business advice you've ever received and from whom?
I've received a lot over the years, but I'm going to go with a relevant one. It's one of my dev managers about 5 years ago telling me to invest in Bitcoin because it's going to grow by a lot. But I think that's probably one of the best ones I've gotten. He finally listened.
Oh, he was spot on. I wish I had listened to the people that were cheering about that years and years ago.
We'd be having a whole different discussion on a yacht somewhere.
Exactly. Gerard, I wanted to thank you so much for joining me on the show today, for sharing your insight. I think we've really touched on a lot of exciting things that are going to be happening when we're talking about mobile, when we're talking about fintech in 2021. I know this has been a challenging year for a lot of folks, but the good news is that there have been so many opportunities and so much innovation that's being pushed forward. And so it's going to be interesting to see where it all goes. So thank you again.
Thank you very much, Scott. It's a great discussion, and it's obviously a lot about the industry as well. So I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And before I let you go, if folks are listening, maybe they work for a bank and they're interested in what Entersekt does, maybe there's some opportunities there. Where should they go? How should they find and connect with you guys?
Well, I think we're on all the major sites and platforms, but you could go to entersekt.com or hook us up on LinkedIn. If you're looking at careers, there's a careers page, but there's also a lot about what we do. And I think, as we mentioned earlier, we're always open to engage with fintechs and partners and look at synergies. Looking forward to engage with that. And for people that want to get that security layer in place and looking at building that as the foundation, have a chat. I think we can do great things together.
Awesome. Thanks again.
Thanks, Scott. Have a great day.
So that completes our show today. Thanks so much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe if you like the show. You can do so on iTunes, Google Play, and many other platforms. So until next time, I'll see you then, and thanks again for listening.
Thank you for listening to another episode of PayPod, brought to you by Soarpayments. Soarpayments is a leading merchant services provider for e-commerce, high-risk, and hard-to-place businesses. If you'd like to get the latest PayPod episodes sent to you automatically, subscribe to the show via iTunes or Stitcher, or visit soarpay.com/podcast.